Morning, everyone. Dr. Lanz here, and this is going to be my first in the series of lectures on cortisol and the stress response. I hope this is a helpful series of lectures to you. I know that my patients find this information really useful, and it's something we talk about a lot, a lot. Because I find that people often underestimate just how profound of an effect cortisol and stress have on the body, even when we don't know that it's having an effect, right? And what I find is when they understand that, they're more motivated to make changes in their lives, and they also feel more empowered that they have more control over a lot of processes in their bodies than they might be led to think. So that's really what we're going to be focusing on here, is kind of in this lecture setting up the basic building blocks for where we're going to be going with each of those individual mini lectures, okay? So cortisol, right? This is the primary stress hormone, right? And I've drawn pictures here of two happy kidneys, right? Happy. That's a really awesome smiley face. Sorry about my poor drawing skills. And above the kidneys, I've drawn two little hats, right? And I think this is kind of a funny way to depict it, because above your kidneys are what are called your adrenal glands. And I always kind of think about them when we'd look at diagrams. We'd be in cadaver labs. Our professor would say it's kind of like a little hat that sits right above your kidney. And I thought that was kind of a cute little sort of analogy, if you will. So the adrenal glands are where cortisol is made and released from, among a bunch of other things. So it makes a lot of things and releases a lot of things into the bloodstream, but cortisol is the most important for this lecture. So what happens is we have a stressor, and the brain essentially sends a signal to the adrenal glands to then release cortisol into the bloodstream to do its work throughout the body. And that's essentially what a hormone is it is a chemical substance that is released from one area, and then it travels longer distances to have downstream effects in the body. Okay? So what I want to say here about stressors, and I think this is really valuable, is that a stressor doesn't have to be big. I think a lot of us think when we think stress is a major emotional stress or feeling stressed out. And that does not really have to be the case, right? It doesn't have to be the case, because your body is going to physiologically respond to a stressful experience. Your brain and body have been primed for that. So even though you may not feel like you're under stress, sometimes you are still experiencing a stress response. I think a really good example is being in a car. So for a lot of, well, maybe if you're driving in traffic, that's stressful. But even getting into a car and driving around, the vigilance that you experience when you are driving, that you're hopefully experiencing, because you should be vigilant when you're driving, that is essentially to some degree a stress response, because you are becoming more hypervigilant of the environment you're in. So cortisol may be increased. It's not going to be like this huge release of cortisol, but it's important to note that small events in your life can actually lead to that stress response. So what is cortisol? Cortisol is what's called a steroid hormone. And what a steroid hormone is it's essentially a hormone made from a cholesterol backbone. Yes, cholesterol, the same thing in your blood that your doctor checks to make sure is not too high. But in this case, it's being used to make a vital substance in the body. Now, this is important. There are other hormones that are steroid hormones using cholesterol as their backbone, and I think one of the most prominent ones are the sex hormones. So androgens, estrogens, progestogens. And this is going to be important for one of our upcoming lectures when we're thinking about testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone in relationship to the stress response. So what happens when we experience a stress response? Our body is smart. It's going to funnel the necessary resources to the place where they need to go in a timely manner. So what's going to happen is the body then is going to start preferentially leaning towards the production of cortisol, because that is what's needed. Now, here's an important point. This system was developed for short bursts. So this technically should not be an issue, because you find the bear, you either run or you fight, And two things are going to happen. Either you're going to die or you're going to survive. It is meant to be a short period of time. So this spike in cortisol should be relatively quick, and then the body goes back to what it does. Our lives are not presenting us with that time of stress. For some of us, our entire life is a tiger that we are running from, and that presents an issue for a system that was designed to be used in short bursts. So I want to just kind of lay that out there for you and just kind of let you think about it a little bit. So here we have the basic foundational piece. I'm going to go to the next page. So cortisol has a lot of downstream effects on different organ systems. Okay, we're going to start with the heart. So if you think about the needs when you are under stress, the body's metabolism is going to go up because you're preparing to run from something or fight. So your heart rate's going to go up, the blood pressure is going to go up because you need to increase the metabolism and the supply of blood because of the demand that's going to be asked from the body. So you're getting a higher blood pressure, higher heart rate. The lungs are also going to go through what's called bronchodilation. And that essentially, in basic terms, means that you are going to be getting more airflow and oxygen transfer into your bloodstream. And this should make sense because we're going to need more oxygen to prepare to fight or flee. And then we have the endocrine system. What happens when cortisol stimulates the endocrine system is that we get a dump of glucose into the bloodstream, so a rise in blood sugar. And that should also make sense because glucose is one of the primary major fuel sources in the body. So we need to be prepared with more fuel. And the endocrine system is also governing the metabolism. And that's going to have this effect on the heart rate and blood pressure. So we have all of these things being stimulated in the process. And hopefully you can already get a sense that a lot of systems where problems can tend to occur are going to be affected by cortisol. Here is another thing, right? In these short-term responses, we are also going to see a decrease in digestion and an elimination because these are essentially considered non-essential tasks for this short period of time. And like I said, this technically shouldn't be an issue because the system should come back online pretty quickly. Digestion. So basically things slow down. We don't digest our food as well. This is why I tell people try not to eat while you're driving because you're likely not going to digest your food as well as if you were sitting calmly. Elimination. Basically, you're not going to pee or poop. When you're under stress, you are just not even going to think about it because it's not the place where you're going to go. So digestion, elimination, and then we have other things. So we think about tissue healing. Also an unnecessary process for that short period of time. So tissue regeneration, tissue healing is going to slow way down because it's not considered important. You're in a moment where you're either going to die or you're going to survive. And if that's the case, you're not worried about repairing a cut. So these are really important little pieces to think about when we move forward in terms of what's happening in the body when cortisol is being released. And to also think about how, for many of us, cortisol is constantly being released. This is a constant process if you're under chronic stress. So a system that should be shutting off fairly quickly is actually staying activated, and think about the effects it's going to have on all of these systems in the body in the long term. So I'm going to drop that right there for you, and then we'll pick up with the next lecture and go from there. Hopefully this is helpful. If you have questions, you can leave them in the comments section or send me a direct message, and we'll go from there.